Let's grow together. Now more. Yo, I don't actually think I introduced myself the first time. My name is Ashley Edwards. I am the co-owner of Iconic Sport Performance. We specialize in building leaders through the game of basketball. In short, we hit basketball-specific training every single day in sport performance with babies from 6 to 12 years old. However, we also want to make sure every single one of these kids in our community can feel us, whether they ever actually walk through these doors or not. So we are educating parents, teachers, and student athletes through the business of sport as well to ensure that we are building healthy and whole children. Welcome to the village. If you would like to join, I want you to like, subscribe, comment any part of this video that you actually enjoy. Today we are actually discussing greats and characteristics of greats. I cannot wait for you to hear what we have discussed. Please, please, please grab your drink, grab your pen, grab your notepad, and let's grow together. See you soon. So my week was heavy, and I don't even really want to say my week. I think, yeah, I felt like I'm on summer vacation. I'm not a child by no means. I got a real job, but I guess because I work with children, when they go on summer break, you know, it's just like the season changes. You know what I mean? The energy in the air, I believe, is a little different. But we celebrated a lot of birthdays in June, like holidays. So it's like I had like two family birthdays, two very, very, very important women in my life celebrated birthdays back to back on like the 15th and the 18th. And of course, like Father's Day is right there. And then I was very fortunate to celebrate. So one grandma turned 70 years old, and then my other grandma turned 75 years old, and they both had parties within 2 weeks. But it's also summer basketball season, and we got a lot of kids here, and I go and support all my babies at their games, and that comes with a whole headache in it of itself because it's a lot going on out here. And so I was with my intern, India, this week, and I said, as we were talking, I was sitting, and my role was to coach her. So she's the coach of the team, and I am coaching / training India to be a better coach and gain some experience and all these things so that she can pursue her goals. And as she was doing her job, of course, on one side, I'm kind of aware of the issues and what we need to work on. But then I was hearing the children talk beside me on the bench, and I saw all of those. And so I kind of came home with that heaviness. And we don't even, we'll get into their parents across from us and the referees. And it's so many complex things. But on top of that, in one way or the other, I had a lot of challenging conversations this week that challenges, I think, all of our perspectives. I think I'm a radical, but I think when you begin to look at numbers, you could argue I'm a radical, right? So if we talk about there's a 1% in terms of money, I think there's a 1% as it pertains to mindset, too. And when we're discussing the 1% as it pertains to mindset, I think that I'm in that 1%. And so because there's a 1 and there's a 99, you can begin to feel like the 1 is a radical if you're talking to the 99. And there are times where I guess I kind of feel like a challenger, and I see it honestly like in my interactions and exchanges with human beings. Something I'm personally trying to work on is true, and even from a leadership perspective, is my delivery of the challenge, right? Because there's got to be space to receive these things, right? And so I think it doesn't matter if I whisper it in the sweetest tone. If it's not ready to be received, it can be harshly received. But I do believe that in some form, shape, or the other, and I think what I don't want to speak to grand, but I think that in my capacity, I do believe that in some shape or form that I am called to serve. And I think sometimes based on that service, we serve based on what we know and based on what we see. And so my challenges come from based on what I know and what I see and what I believe. And oftentimes what I hear you say, you see, and you believe. I do know that people's principles, morals, and values are different. And so oftentimes when I ask these challenging questions, I'm looking to gain more insight as to what people hold as their principles, morals, and values. And from there, that's where the challenges arise. And it is in the answers to the challenges or the responses to the answers that may say that may range from it shouldn't take all that ain't my business, to almost angry and you're like kind of cutting me down like wah! And those are the things that like kind of show me a little bit more of like really who you are and what you're dealing with. But as I integrate and I lead in my own way in my own community, I'm finding the issues that we have within our community. And so I've had a very enjoyable week, but though my week has been enjoyable, it's still been hard. And so I'd say today at this moment, my heart is heavy, my chest is heavy. So I made me a drink. But y'all know I'm not drinking, so this is my mocktail. And the mocktail of the day is a man mosa. And a man mosa is tequila, champagne, and OJ, orange juice. So cheers to y'all as we get going on another episode of the Now More podcast. So y'all know how we get down. We get jumping with our icebreaker. Hopefully to lighten up the mood. Hopefully to lighten up the mood. We're playing We're Not Really Strangers. So I'm really kind of playing with y'all. I'm going to ask a couple questions so we can get to know each other a little more intimately here in the village, and maybe you can get into my mind. Good night. First of all, this be so thick. Oh, my mama, this be so thick. And I jumped into level 2. I was thinking that I was going to jump in. I thought level 2 would be easier. Level 1 is perception. Level 2 is connection. And level 3 is, I'd say level 1. Level 3 is reflection. God, dog. I really want to pick another card, but I want to pick another card because I struggle with vulnerability, but I don't want to pick another card because I'm challenging myself to be more vulnerable. So we'll see if this makes the cut. What is your first love's name and the reason you fell in love with them? I don't want to answer this question. Oh, my mama, I don't. I really don't. God. And I think, if I'm being totally honest, I think the reason I don't want to answer the question is probably pride. I think I know somebody who says they don't have exes. Like that would be I ain't got no exes. And I think that obviously that's just not true. But I think sometimes people, based on the place that they are in their lives, they add more validity to the claim or not. And I'm just like, I don't want to disrespect anybody. I don't want nobody to ring my phone. I don't want none of that. I don't want no smoke. I don't want not smoke, okay? But in the spirit of vulnerability, because we are all challenged to grow, and we are doing more here at the Now More podcast, I believe my first love's name was Ramika Rodriguez. I was 16 years old, and I believe I fell in love with Ramika because it was really the first person who was as radical as I was, right? In the spirit of the 1%. Who was my age, who was aligned with my intellect, who did not care about shaking the table, who did not care what she wore and what she said and what she did and how she cared. She just didn't care if she fit in. And so as an athlete and someone who definitely played the game, right, and was cool and was suave. This is if you've been following along, this is the same little mama that I threw the teddy bear at, okay, when I was a little baby. But I think that as attracted to her as I was as like, you know, a vessel and an actual human being, I think I was, and I was also attracted to her spirit. I was also attracted to her mind, and I was also attracted to the way in which she challenged me, in more than one way. She consistently challenged my perspective. She consistently challenged how I carried myself, how I treated other people, how I even engaged with my family. And she shared with me a lot of hard truths that I felt like sometimes were too deep for even 16-year-olds to even dive into, but it really felt purposeful. My parents raised me to be somebody who always moved with purpose and intention. Though I have definitely dated casually, sometimes in my rebellion, sometimes in just being an athlete, I do believe that there were some ones, there were a few ones that I could probably count on one hand that were a part of the dream and a part of the mission, and they fit the purpose. And I think Ramika was the first one that I felt like fit the purpose for my life and definitely helped me become largely in part the human that I am and contribute a lot to who I am today. And that sounds real heavy for some young love on some Chris Brown, right? I think that's real heavy. All right, my question. Do you believe everyone has a calling? If so, do I think I found mine? I believe that this question is a perfect transition to our topic today. And I'm not even going to hold you. I'm kind of sort of pulling an audible. We're supposed to be discussing grades today and what I believe makes a grade. And what I decided to kind of segue and kind of compartmentalize and break it down to this, like, characteristics of grades. And I want to specifically harp on accountability and commitment today. And so I want to kind of preface this by saying that I am a firm believer of Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. And if you don't, I think that this can be triggering. I think that this can be radical. I think that this can, it might even sound like I'm brainwashed. But I think in the sake of humanity, we all are entitled to our own beliefs. In the sake of our democracy, we have those rights and those privileges and those freedoms, which I am grateful for. And by no means is anything that I'm looking to share and express today meant to tell you what to do, right? Or impose and inflict on your beliefs. But I hope you can ride with me and stick it out to at least hear my perspective. And to circle back, do you believe everyone has a calling? Based on my spiritual beliefs, I think that absolutely every single one of us were born with a purpose. But I believe, again, based on my spiritual beliefs, we all have to accept that call. Based on what I know about Jesus, he gives us free will. And though he knew the amount of hairs I was going to have on my head, he knew my name. I've even heard folks describe it even as detailed as the only thing your mama and daddy did was lay down to have you, right? Or lay down to make you, I should say. But the moment that it was conceived, it was almost as if God took over. And he designed a purpose. He called you by name. But I believe we have to step into that calling. I believe we have to step into that purpose. And we do that by accepting the call. And I think that accepting the call does not mean, bear with me, you don't know what you're going to do. You don't know who you're going to be. But you do know that a calling is coming. And you do know that he has a plan for you. And you accept the call just by saying, I believe in you. So by saying I believe in Jesus it comes with this, all right, come on, let's go. We going for a ride. And do I think I found mine? I think predicated upon how heavy my heart is today. And oftentimes when I'm going into these gyms or these conversations with families or even with other coaches, and even sometimes with my peers, especially with other generations, I am aware as to how much they connect. The books that I read, the sermons I watch, the podcasts that I listen to, the conversations that spark, you would almost, like, it almost seems unreal. It seems far too unreal to honestly, for me, not even actually be able to acknowledge that there is a God, but then even like, it's so crazy. The timing is so impeccable that it just seems very, very specific for me. But as much as I'm also referencing that I feel like I found mine, it is because in a purpose way, there are times where when we walk into a room, what bothers me ain't gonna bother you. Because I have specific, unique gifts, qualities, perspectives, views, as do you. And I believe when that thing bothers you, and that thing has bothered you for so long, to the point where it feels like it's following you, to the point where you can feel it as I'm describing, I feel like you're hot, right? Like in a warm, cold, no, you're hot, you right there. And so I think my heaviness would suggest that I'm hot. I think number one, me accepting the call, like, and acknowledging, all right, Jesus, I'm with you, is there. I think my heaviness is there. I think the divine timing of all of the resources is there. But then I think what actually, like, puts me in it is I'm actually doing it. So the difference is I've had a crazy week, both high and low, fun and hard, stretching. But I'm also inspired. I'm also fired up. I had a conversation last night that led to like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had to go get cute for y'all today, 7 in the morning, and I'm here. So I'm short on sleep, but I'm fired up because of my calling. And so I think that there are times where the conversations can last longer, and my cup can kind of overflow. And it's in the heaviness and what I do with the heaviness that actually puts you in it. So I think we have callings that we have to accept, but I think it's not enough to just say, yeah, I think there's also something you have to do. And so I think I'm in mine because I'm actually doing. I'm showing up at the games. I'm showing up at the podcast. I'm having the tough conversations. And it doesn't matter how many punches life may throw at me or my people. Even if I'm fighting back alone, I'm fighting back. So there we go. The drink is really good. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, but it's not liquor. So in terms of taste, if you're looking for a mocktail, the Ritual and the Rondell. So Rondell's the Cava, and the Ritual is the tequila alternative. And it is really good. As you can see, I like a splash of orange juice. I don't like to overpower the orange juice. And I think, interestingly enough, though, the reason that I'm saying it's not liquor, and this is just what's true, is as I'm telling you that I feel heavy, the alcohol will make me feel something different than the heaviness. And so I think a part of the fasting and a part of the purpose is to sit in that shit, feel what you gonna feel, and also I'm like, well, what you gonna do about it? Like, what are you gonna do about it? And I think that oftentimes when you can sit in the Patron and the Prosecco, I could sit around and I could talk and I could talk and I could talk, and maybe I could vent to even others. Maybe I could journal, I could listen, but it can prevent an inaction. It can prevent action. And so it tastes good, and it allows me to still act upon the thing. to go back to all these resources and how they work together for the greater good, I was on Instagram this week, and a young lady named Felicia Hatcher posted this reel that posed a really challenging perspective for me and my peers, my little army of folks that I rock with real heavy, who I think sometimes can appreciate my challenges, sometimes cannot, it's to be determined. But Felicia referenced Tony Robbins, and she stated that Tony Robbins suggests that the quality of your life is predicated based on the quality of your questions. And she stated that someone asked her the question, who are we when you are uninterrupted? And she continued to state that if the light is only green, what would you build? And she stated that she's not really sure if you can actually answer that question without actually acknowledging what interrupted you to begin with. So, boom, you was born, light's green, God's giving you that go. What created an intersection? And so she stated, what do we carry with us into the boardrooms, into our meetings that are preventing us from to go from level to level and hold us or limit us from this growth and this calling that we were referring back to, and limiting who we are as we may be afraid to venture to those new levels, again, based on that imposter syndrome and all these other contexts, okay? And I sent this question to 5 folks, and on top of that, what I really, really liked is that she was she was able to acknowledge the fact that she didn't have an answer. She was it was such a good question. I did not know the answer at the time, so I just wrote it down. And to let you all into my brain, the way that my brain works is I don't really have bounds, and I don't like to take credit for those things. I'm gonna be honest. Sometimes this whole Jesus thing, it really takes the pressure off of me. There was a time, if you believe in the context of faith without works is dead, there was a time I was all work and very little faith. I thought I believed in God, but I did not fully understand God. And I really believed in my grandma's God. You know what I mean? It wasn't really my personal experience. I also went to a private Southern Baptist Christian school, and on everything I love, I only started venturing into researching God then because everything in my being was this can't be the same God. Something they did at this particular Christian school, as an example, my mom actually had me, I think she was pregnant at 18, she had me at 19, and at this particular institution, if young women got pregnant, they would actually kick you out of school. Based on my mom's support system, she was able to actually finish high school and finish college on time, and as opposed to my birth in and of itself necessarily being an interruption, I think we've been able to win. We've been able to do some great things together. But you gotta ask my mama. That's just my perspective. And that was my first time kind of venturing into God. But after that, of course, after I was angry, right, and the way that they were kind of doing my mama, proverbially, I got into my young adulthood and I just lived. And I had this understanding of God, but more than anything, my confidence was rooted in me. So to make that make sense, I play basketball and I'm a shooter. So when you rock through the city, everybody knows Ashley can shoot the ball. And it's why I'm not really impressed by the Steph Currys. It's really why I'm not impressed by the Caitlin Clarks. It was something that was my specific gift that I honed. 500 makes a day for summers on end. Work was put in. But Ashley walked around with this energy, with this fire, with this dog, with this charisma because she was a shooter. So everybody saw this confidence that Ashley exuded, but no one really knew at the time that it was only because of the work I put in. So oftentimes when people would like kind of hate on me or have these different perspectives or these issues, I'm like, yo, you come to the gym with me, big dog. Like I mean, as a matter, I need a rebounder. Like I'm getting my own rebound on these 500 makes. Okay, so my confidence in who I was always rooted in the work. So even to take it into my young adulthood, my confidence was rooted into the work. So when we opened Iconic Sport Performance, late nights, early mornings is all we really knew. It was such a grind, and it was such a limitation because I was working in me and my own damn power, man. Like if as humans, our batteries die, right? As humans, I only have but so many experiences. I only have but so much knowledge. I only have but so much wisdom. But to be able to tap into God, what that has allowed me to do is have access to these endless resources. I tell my business partner, and I don't know if she's fully accepted this or not yet, but I've asked her to consider this idea, this premise, because she truly tries to like give us credit for what we did, and I do accept that. I do accept the credit for what we did, but I can also acknowledge in my own way the more. So when we first opened, I was asking God for $850 a month. I was like, man, God, please, like, I just need $850 a month. We got 500 little club flyers, took them to all over the city, dropped them off at like your Starbucks and your small businesses and so on and so forth. And we had a grand opening, and voila, $850 covered. And so the more in me in 2024, almost 10 years later to the date, says, just imagine if you would have asked God for 1,000, 2,000, 10,000. Because he's a God who has no limits, who has no bounds, who owns everything. When we're like, hey, I want that house, or hey, I want that lot, he like, bro, you could have had this whole, I own all of this. That's all you want. You could have anything. So I have a very, very abundant mindset. So when she suggests or asks the question, who are we uninterrupted? I believe with those same, like I even think of the question outside of those same bounds, that there are no limits. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and as she was we were going back and forth about it, I was expressing to her that I don't really believe in these bounds. And so I didn't just, when she stated the boardroom and she stated leaders, I was like, I'm not just thinking about who I am at work, I'm thinking about who I am in life. So what interrupted me in the first place? So what stopped me from being able to be vulnerable with you? What stopped me from being able to connect in other relationships? What stopped me from taking risk? What stopped me from being so courageous? What stopped me from having confidence? What stopped me from doing? And I think that we carry those things with us, right? So I think it is sometimes the experience outside of the boardroom that comes with us into the boardroom. I think sometimes who we are on the basketball court, who we are in the classroom, who it is in our business is a scar that carried with us, that oftentimes we project and that we see, that no one else even knows really exists. So there are limits and there are bounds that we place on ourselves based on our own beliefs, based on our own experiences. And I'm trying to carefully use the word trauma because that is offensive to some. But I think as we experience our particular traumas, we begin to take it with us and we hold on to it and say, I can never drive to the basket again because the last time I drove to the basket, I tore my ACL. I can never love again because the last time I loved, they hurt me. I cannot start that business because if it fails, I don't have the support system in my family to back me up. And so because you didn't have the family, you don't start the business. Because you're afraid of being hurt again, you're afraid to love again. Because you are more afraid of injury, which spiritually speaking we could refer to as like a valley. You're afraid of the abundance, right? Like you will not access the abundance if you don't take the risk. There's this like quote, I think it's like this visual. It's kind of like this little girl sitting on the mountain, and it's like, but what if I fall? And it's like, but darling, what if you fly? And my abundance has always allowed me to take just enough of the risk. But what I found as God kept blessing me, even in my limitations, even in my $850, even in starting my business when everybody thought it was a bad idea, even when starting a podcast, right? Like this consistent dynamic of like, how are you going to make this work? With every dream that I had, with every goal that I had, as I started to check them off, it gave me more courage and more credit to like dream more, dream bigger, dream larger without these confines. And if Ashley could get 3,000 square feet at 23 years old, what if Ashley combined it with God? And so about 2 years ago, I kind of had this like, all right, God, every vision board, we killing it. And I like literally vision board parties. I'm like, bro, end of the year, like, man, everything you wrote down, you got. And I had this like crazy idea that like maybe all of this dreaming that I was doing and all this success that I was having, still with, of course, these issues and these interruptions and these intersections on my own doing, it was just kind of like, well, what if I did it instead of doing it my way? Because all I've ever been comfortable enough to do is do it my way. What if I did it God's way? Because he's the only person that knows more than me. He's the only person that knows me better than me. He's the only person that knows any of these people that I work with better than me. So when I walk into the gym and I'm trying to connect with a parent or I'm trying to connect with a student athlete, it's not Ashley doing it. I'm on a type of time now where I'm praying first, decrease me and increase you. So before you see me, he is talking through me. He is using me, my body, my hands, my actions, my energy. And I've given and kind of submitted to this like whole ordeal for him to work and flow through me. And I think that when we talk about why we're interrupted, I struggle because there was a time, not just me, but my folks, my community, what I see, what I observe is we are still interrupted from dreaming. We're distracted at the boardroom table because we haven't let go of what interrupted us to begin with. And so I think that until we can address our traumas and address our issues and address our pain and actually begin to heal, which is accountability, we can't actually step into what God has promised. And so I thought about my leaders. I thought about my first leaders. I thought about, like, technically, I'm like, before we even talking my first boss, I'm talking about my parents. I'm talking about, obviously, like my grandparents, my family, my aunts, my uncles, everybody who impacted me. I thought about my coaches. I thought about my teachers. I thought about my dean. And I thought about how I showed up. And the 4 agreements I absolutely love, because what happens is as these leaders are here, sometimes they begin to impose on you their limits. So sometimes we get interrupted from dreaming because your mama wasn't a dreamer. And then sometimes when you tell your mama she ain't a dreamer, it's disrespectful, right? And I think that that's where there's a disconnect, because We've got 20-somethings and 30-somethings and 40-somethings and 50-somethings that all have this brilliance, 60-somethings, 70-somethings. But we cannot connect and win as this village because of your own trauma and limitations and hurt and pain and bounds. There are times, even in my life, that I've experienced my own personal success has affected or afflicted an elder. And I'm just like, man, why are you messing with me? Like, why does my success bother you? I know folks who their success, like their parents are bothered by their success. That's weird. There are times where your siblings, right, are affected by your success. And I believe as long as we are carrying this hurt and this pain and these things, we are affecting each other from fulfilling our calling, because you have no idea how relevant your voice may be. And it's kind of like, it happened. But like, at what point do we begin to use the bad for our good? And I don't really care if you were called to a 1 or you were called to 1,000. I think we all have a job to do based on what happened. A good friend of mine suggested, and I think as we study greats, there's a very common theme in greatness that's kind of like you only really get to soar and you only really get to fly and you only really have a fight in you once you've been knocked down. Like, you don't just like start swinging, right? But something hard happened, and it is in you responding to the hard that you begin to soar and you begin to fly and all of these things. But as I've been having these conversations over the past few weeks, the tone seems to be of the 99%, if that's what we're referencing. It seems to be blameless. It seems to be powerless. There are times where they get angry and it feels like they deflect and kind of blame somebody else. But overall, they absolve themselves from accountability. And I struggle with that because your life is very much your own. So it don't matter what my mama and daddy did. It don't matter what he or she did to me. It don't matter what pain I endured. Did I persevere? Did I finish the race? Did I quit? Did I continue? And I think if we talk in spirituality, the devil got you right where he wants you if you quitting. If you take a hit and the hit lay you out, you done, you're down, I got you right where I want you. You're up against the ropes, right? And I think that there are certain people who, in getting knocked down or in hurdles proverbially being placed upon you, there are humans who use those same hurdles as stepping stones instead. And so if there's two types of people in the world, I guess my thought is how do we advance our world and how do we advance our culture? How do we advance our people? How do we advance our humans? How do we advance our children if the adults in present day don't accept this accountability for just themselves? If I am not healed, I should not lead. And if I am in leadership positions, I have a responsibility to continue to grow and develop and serve so that I am not inflicting, right, more harm and more trauma and more just do. I was using this analogy the other day. There's this like, okay, I wish I knew exactly where it came from, but think we talking Thanksgiving dinner, okay? We're talking Thanksgiving. As grandma's cutting the legs off to the turkey, she passes that tradition down and daughter, right? And then eventually the granddaughter begins to do the cooking in her home and she's hosting the family and grandma sitting at the table and it's like, hey, baby, why you cutting the legs off the turkey? And she like, well, that's the recipe. Mom told me to cut the legs off. And she like, girl, I only cut the legs off to that damn turkey because my pot wasn't big enough. But you got a Dutch oven in a 2,000 square foot kitchen. Stop, you wasting meat now, right? But there's this context where, even my granddad said, man, we cook chicken and ribs for y'all, and y'all can like warm up a can of baked beans and some hot dogs. Like, where's the timing? Where's the intentionality? Where is like the love and the cultural, right? The gatherings and the get-togethers. But it's where I ask the question, like, where we get that from? If you didn't teach us how to cook, how we cooking? If I watch you, if all I do is watch you, as opposed to you explaining to me, how do I get it? And it's interesting because as I'm watching and I'm observing without your explanation, because we're not going to sit here and make it seem like we didn't grow up in a world that suggested so many of us in our culture should be seen and not heard, or only speak when spoken to. But then we also kind of contradict ourselves, because if we assume we're making an ass out of ourselves. So you don't want me to talk to you unless you talk to me. But while I'm in the kitchen watching you, you want me to what? Just know that your pot wasn't big enough? And that's what I really kind of mean about being absolved by responsibility. Children are only going to learn these lessons because we're teaching them. But we can only teach children lessons that we are hip to, that we are self-aware of, that we are responsible for. If you cannot take accountability to what you have and what you've learned, generational curses do not break. And there's a reality in which children will continue to fight Goliaths proverbially that you were supposed to slay. And from what I understand, I'm not really sure that your 5-year-old or your 10-year-old or your 15-year-old is fully capable of that or was called to that. And so we penalize the teenage pregnancy. We penalize their low self-esteem. We penalize how they carry themselves, right? We even penalize the sexy reds without like questioning, how in the world did we get here? We penalize children for not sharing our values without realizing, how did this great divide get here? There's this idea in which our ancestors fought to vote, right? It doesn't matter if we talking women, it don't matter if we talking black and minorities and so on and so forth. And it's like we kind of owe our ancestors, right? Because we're our ancestors' wildest dreams. But simultaneously, it's kind of like there's a disconnect. Because somewhere along the way, where we were our ancestors' wildest dreams, I think there's a generation of people that didn't fight as maybe hard as our ancestors fought. And as I'm listening to our blameless, powerless conversations, even if we talk in basketball, I made a post on Instagram about how AAU is terrible and that you should put your child in rec league. And so many people began to roast rec league. And as a doer, as a dreamer, as a creator, if rec league sucks, create a better rec league. Which may sound grandiose, but as an intellectual, as a citizen, I pay taxes every year to the government for these recreational parks. So, if you don't want to create your own league, hold the leagues accountable. You're paying the money. But it seems like sometimes this middle ground, right? This subgroup right now would rather blame, would rather comment, would rather live tweet and dog and diss than do. And your baby's lives are at stake in the imbalance. So as you talk about how unqualified the coaches are, what do you do to get the coaches qualified? As you sit on the sideline and you inference, like, they've never played before, we should play a 2-3 zone, or the kids are undisciplined, or he has no structure, or she has no, because you've got the resume. Well, why are you not out there doing it? So I believe that there's more than one way to skin a cat in this scenario, but what we would prefer to do is blame. And so to my point about we didn't do what the ancestors did, I think it's interesting. I was using this analogy, and it sounds crazy, but when I ask parents to go and volunteer coach, or when I ask them to go to school board meetings, or when I when I ask parents to maybe even run for school board or start schools or do these things from small but significant, I mean, just vote. Like, just vote. And maybe just actually be an informed voter, right? To huge, pivotal, mind-blowing things that are bigger than you have ever asked, thought, dreamed, or imagined. Again, it don't take all that. Again, this is bigger than me. Again, it's this feedback, and it's just like, is it hard? Yeah. Hell yeah. Real hard. Is it inconvenient? Yes. Real inconvenient. But is it worth it? Yes. And why? Like, and it sounds crazy, y'all, but it's so interesting. I think with every generation, we are supposed to improve. I think with every generation, we're supposed to move forward. And I think what's crazy to me is as these generations are supposed to progress, we're like, it's hard, we shouldn't do it, or the world is against us, or they trying to take away our rights, or, oh, well, all of this, right? All of this. My ancestors were sitting at countertops, right? They're sitting at diners in Greensboro getting whipped cream and pancakes and coffee poured on their head as they protest and fought for what they felt like they believed in. You got people marching. You got people taking stakes. You got people taking stands. And so much so many of them are actually not even still here to see what we have access to today. And you won't even have a conversation with an elected official that you elected. The privilege. the privilege that it is to vote, the privilege that it is to speak your mind, the privilege that it is to even be able to sit across from and allow your voice to be heard and to have the influence and the impact that we have, or the potential that we could have, is our ancestors' wildest dreams. Is it hard? Is it inconvenient? Yes. But is it as hard or is it as convenient as dogs attacking you? Is it as hard or inconvenient as fire hoses on your head? Is it as hard or inconvenient as people throwing these racial slurs and screaming at your face, but knowing that you may be hung for fighting back? No. And so the issue that I have is it's so hard. It's so inconvenient. But you're literally allowing the life and the success of your child, again, to be in the imbalance. There was a mom who I was talking to. She came back to me and she told me, she said, man, Ash, that AAU thing, man, you were so right. You were so right. And I'm here to tell y'all, man, I don't want nobody to come back and tell me I was right, because that meant that you subjected my child to that. So as you are opposing or as you are enacting, as you're trying to figure it out, there are consequences to all of it. The action or the inaction, the belief or the disbelief. Even you sitting there is still a decision, as no decision is still a decision. And lives are consistently at stake. So I'm asking that we take a little bit more accountability, because I do believe that our children's lives are in the balance, which ultimately would mean the future of our world is in the balance. And I think much of which stops us from pulling up to the board meeting, stops us from confronting a coach or a teacher, much of which even sometimes stops us from confronting or correcting our children, is that thing that interrupted us, right? So that thing that we carry, whether it be our self-esteem, whether it be our imposter syndrome, whether it be our own trauma, it is stopping us from creating a better world. It's stopping you from experiencing love. It's stopping you from experiencing abundance. It's stopping you from experiencing joy. It is stopping you from experiencing peace. And if you don't got it, where they gonna get it from? Because they watching you. So I'm hoping that if it matters that much to you, if your children matter that much to you, that we are committed to doing more. And the more in my challenge, guys, is a digestible more. I'm not asking you to do it all in one day. To be frank, sometimes the more I'm asking you is to just consider what the hell I'm saying. Oftentimes, it doesn't matter whether it's somebody that I love or somebody that I know can't stand me. When they share something with me, I'm always going home and I'm praying about it and I'm sitting with it, because I don't want to stop it from limiting me in my growth, because I think that anybody can be used in any capacity. So I'm going to God and figuring out if this is something that is relevant, if this is something that is necessary, and oftentimes that has helped me on my way. So some of my more is just consider what I'm saying. Just consider my perspective. I love my grandmother, man. We were talking about, we was playing kind of like a card game, but it's this card game. I wish I knew what it was called. The card game was centered around like getting to know your ancestors a little more, right? Like it's really in-depth, detailed questions about their history. And the question was, what do you love about your generation? And she stated that what she loves about her generation, she stated some other things, but the thing that stuck out to me was that they respected their elders. So I said, well, respectfully, if you respected your elders and you were to, let's say, perceive that I don't respect you as your grandchild, where did the disconnect happen? And what I mean sometimes by like absolving and this blameless and this powerless is like, and what my uncle reiterated for me and what I kind of was asking her to consider is, as a generation that respected their elders, is because your parents taught you to respect your elders. And so if your grandchildren don't respect you as they should, then somewhere there was this disconnect. But that disconnect is your children. So is there any possibility that maybe you didn't emphasize respect maybe as much as your mama did? And what we're finding is the same way that maybe we didn't emphasize respect, maybe we didn't emphasize, right, cooking, like we were talking about. Maybe you didn't emphasize health, like we're talking about. Maybe you didn't emphasize financial literacy. Maybe you didn't emphasize the importance of not selling grandma's house. So while we're out here trying to make sure that our children are not experiencing the life that we experienced and knocking down hurdles for them as opposed to helping them climb them, we are in fact making powerless, blameless, and actually even more so entitled children than really ever before. And I think that that's actually counterproductive to where we're trying to go. So I believe that this can be rectified through thought, through logic, through reason, through conversation, through connection. But are we even really willing to consider the more? Because I know a lot of worlds where that question I asked my grandmother would be disrespectful. I know a lot of people, I know a lot of 50-year-olds that tell 20-year-olds, you know nothing. And it's just like, well, if we can't converse, if I can't share with you what I know from my perspective, and you can't share with me what you know from your perspective, how do we ever share and serve and grow beyond our limits and our bounds? And I really kind of feel like that was the purpose to begin with. To share, to serve, and to love. But if we can't hear, how are we doing that? If we can't be accountable, how are we doing that? And I think to kind of conclude in the same direction that I began, my audacity, my gall, my power, this ability, like on a day like today where I feel heavy as fuck, it's one of those days where this problem, because honestly, the assaults that are happening to children mentally and physically on the basketball court are happening to them in classrooms, are happening to them in their homes, and they're also happening to them like sexually, like physically, like assault is right, like assault is assault. Like this, it's there's variables. Like it's happening. So this like dire need, this sense of urgency that like it ends with me. Like we gotta get it done. Like I don't care. I don't care about your money. I don't care about your power. I don't care about your influence. I don't care about who you know. I don't care about where you came from. It's getting done. Why? Because they're worth it. And I think that my power again, my gall, my audacity to like fight back doesn't come from me. Like again, this heaviness that I feel today with the conversations that I've had and the challenges that I've heard, and like the church pastors that are like doing the things that they're doing, and the politicians that are doing the things that they're doing, and the people that know but are too afraid of this and too afraid of that, and the churches that are like starting all of the gyms so that they can make as much money as possible, so that the club owners can come in and make as much money as possible, all in the name of our ignorance and on the back of our families for the success of our children. So we say that we're finding not to be true. Like it's cycles. Every single system has this same cyclical theme. And it's a lot of people involved. It's a lot of power involved. And it's even more that don't even know that it's happening. It's even more that feel like we can't do anything about it. And so as I'm kind of that one that's like, I'm willing to oppose everybody who's coming against this, because I truly believe that this is justifiable. I truly believe that this is right. I truly believe that this is what God has called me to do. I truly believe that this is the kingdom come of sorts. I don't care how much it's shaking the table. And as a human, it's hard. As a human, I cry. As a human, it's heavy. As a human, I don't always have it in me. But God. So I don't got it. I have no idea. I have no idea how we solve all these problems. But I think God has the answers. But do we have the courage to even ask? Do we have maybe the patience to listen? Wait until we hear. Wait until we hear clearly. And then once we hear, you gonna do it? Will you be obedient? Or we just keep taking what's handed to us? And as long as you keep taking what's handed to you, we're going to keep having cancer, not just physically in our body, but cancers in our families, cancers on our teams, cancers as our leaders, and the cancer will continue to eat away at our culture. The cancer will continue to eat away at our community. So how committed are you really? So I'm reading this book called, and it's super dope. It's 177 Mental Toughness Secrets at a World Class by Steve Siebold, I think is his name. And what I love about it, it's kind of like in a devotional capacity. It's only like one page at a time. So you can kind of like read one mental toughness key every day of the world class. And obviously it's speaking to that 1%. And I felt like it was very fitting because what he's talking about is kind of like these greats in terms of this accountability and these commitments. It's called Champions Make Do or Die Commitments. So I'm going to read y'all this passage right quick. We're going to get on up out of here. I think I need to feed my soul in another way than this mocktail right now. All right. Steve says, if there were one word that defined the champion, the word would be commitment. When everyone else is tired, exhausted, and burned out from the battle, the great ones are just getting warmed up. It's not that they don't fatigue, but their commitment to their dream keeps them going. Average people think it would be nice to achieve their goals, as long as it doesn't get too uncomfortable or painful. Champions don't recognize pain because they have made a commitment to do what it takes to win. Amateur performers make a commitment and approach it like a hobby. Professional performers make a commitment and approach it like a war, knowing they will have to endure an unknown level of suffering along the road to victory. Amateur performers always question the price they have to pay for this success. Champions pay whatever the price it takes. This small difference in mental strategy makes all the difference in the world. Commitment is more about making a decision to do whatever it takes to succeed than anything else. Yet only the pros seem to be able to get themselves to make these decisions. He has a quote here from George Gilder. You cannot keep a committed person away from success. Place stumbling blocks in his way, and he takes them for stepping stones, and on them he will climb to greatness. Take away his money, and he makes spurs of his poverty to urge him on. The person who succeeds has a program. He fixes his course and adheres to it. He lays his plan and he executes them. He goes straight to his goal. He is not pushed this side and that every time a difficulty is thrust his way. If he can't get over it, he goes through it. And from what I understand, the only way out is through. The action step that he challenges with is to make a list of the 5 most important things that you are committed to in your life and ask this critical thinking question in the world in which Napoleon Hill from, what are you talking about, Outwitting the Devil says, the devil got us right where he wants us because we not thinking for ourselves. Are my habits, actions, and behaviors congruent with my commitments? And in the sake of vulnerability, I'll tell you my 5. My 5 were, number 1, God's will for my life. Number 2, my health. Number 3, my joy. Number 4, my family. And number 5, my community. So, it doesn't matter what he asks me. It doesn't matter where he asks me to go. I'm your daughter. I will go anywhere you lead. So, what are you committed to? And is it do or die? If it's not, are you really committed? At Not More Pie, we're very intentional about taking every opportunity to feed into the village and the community around us. So every single episode, I ask this question to conclude the episode. What can you commit to doing starting today to better feed into the village? And I want you to consider the fact that the village, it don't have to be mine. It doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be 40,000 people. It can just be your world. So when I make this statement that I'm out here trying to change the world, it starts by just changing your world. So whatever that means to you, whatever you can do, what can you commit to doing starting today to better feed into the village? I want to thank you guys so much for joining us. I feel like this was a little more intense than what I intended to be. But I think this is just real. This is what greatness is. Again, we have to go through the things that are even hard. But every episode, you already know, we wrap up with a quote. And as always, I consistently feel like this doggone thing by Brene Brown hits home and is relevant at all times. Our imperfections are what connect us to each other and our humanity. Our vulnerabilities are not weaknesses. They are powerful reminders to keep our hearts and minds open to the reality that we are all in this together. And I promise you that quote, man, it really, really reminds me of the Coach Carter John. Like, it really reminds me of Coach Carter John in the sense of the more you dream, the more you fly, you actually, in fact, kind of shine that light that God intends for you to shine. It's not necessary for you to dim this light. And in fact, the more you allow your light to shine, the more you allow yourself to dream, allow yourself to have the power and the authority that God has given you the entitlement to move with, the permission to move with, it actually gives more the courage to do the same. If any part of this episode touched you, rock with you, bothered you, challenged you, I'm very, very interested to hear what you have to say. Interestingly enough, me and my folks don't really go to the club no more. We drink mocktails and real drinks sometimes, and we have these conversations, and that's just not actually fun to everybody. But we actually trying to change the world. And so I'm grateful for them sticking with me. I think as much as I challenge them, I don't think they realize how much I'm actually challenged myself. Every single standard that I hold them to, I hold myself to also. There's nothing that I ask my babies in here to do that I cannot do, that I will not do, that I will not learn to do. As the game grows, I grow with it, because I feel like that is what makes an impeccable leader. Someone has to actually be impeccable with their word. So thank you. I'm grateful that you stuck it out. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. And I'm excited for what's next. See y'all soon.